caving in this area, in Tony's Grove area, is probably my favorite place ever to cave anywhere I've probably ever caved in my life. I love it up here, and I think one of the big reasons is the potential.
There should exist some sort of cave up there that would drain the master system. If you get into the master system that ultimately led to the spring 4 miles away, that you'd have this great place that would be nationally known.
We have this bedding of quartzite that runs at a fairly steep slope going down towards Logan Canyon, and we've always wondered if we'll ever find a cave that would go down and actually meet that bedding plane of that quartzite. But at some point along the way, they've always ended. And so that's why this cave is so exciting, because for once it didn't end. Years ago, there was a gentleman that decided to do his master's thesis or his doctoral thesis up here, and he began looking at all of these caves in this area and began putting them on a topographical map and trying to locate where they were. And so automatically people became interested.
Just previous to that year, the Bear River Grotto had just been formed, and some of those initial members had come up here wanting to go through the thesis and wanted to find all of these caves. We'd spread out quite a bit and had covered quite a bit of terrain over a few hours. When we were coming off the top of one of the ridges, you could see a little level spot.
Threw a few rocks down, it sounded really deep. We had the rope with us, so we decided to drop it, see how deep it was.
I remember very vividly as I'm rappelling down and I'm looking at the rock, and all of a sudden it's just reflecting really brightly back into your face, and it was a shock because all that sudden that snow cone was only just 3 or 4 feet from my head. Got to the bottom, we looked around, couldn't find any horizontal. At that point it was pretty late. We had to get out.
I was one of the last ones, or I decided to be the last one out, being that there were 7 of them, and it being over 200 feet, it took a while. So I just decided to climb around towards the back of the known cave at that time. Just the crack going straight up in the ceiling, just really couldn't see the top, so just decided just to start climbing. I don't even know how high, probably 50 feet or so, and then saw just kind of a hole and decided to kind of pop into it. Immediately the cave changed dramatically.
My first understanding of anything was when Ryan came home late at night, and he come in and he says, "Dad," he says, "we found it. We found the big one." He says, "I climbed out there and they dropped this rock down." He says, "It went forever. I think it's like 1,000 feet deep." So I said, "Okay, if you think it's 1,000 feet deep, we'll take a 150-foot rope and we'll probably get to the bottom."
I remember thinking, I just got to get back as soon as I can. We didn't have another rope with us. And I knew it was deep. I didn't know how deep, because it was just, I couldn't get a straight shot down, and just the rocks kept banging all the way down.
I think it was like 3 or 4 days later, we packed up and headed up there. So we went back in and we looked up this crack, and I said, "Ryan, you are out of your mind," because you look up this crack and it's maybe 3 feet wide going up this crack, but the walls are covered in ice, and you look and you just say, there's no way you can climb this. It's crazy. And then if you fall, you scoot down this ice thing and drop off another ledge. So it's like death, you know.
Dad, this is the pit right now.
At this point, we go down and we rappel down to the end of the rope, and it's worse than Ryan's climb because it's wet, and we had no idea what was under us. And at the end of the rope, we're still above the floor, and Ryan says, "I'm going anyway," and he drops off the end of the rope. And so then I came down and did the same thing, and we both figured we're dead, you know. But anyway, we could reach up and grab the rope, but it'd be really hard to get your centers on it. So off we went down this cave, and we get to a point where we start hearing the roar of this water, and we see things start to drop very seriously, and we start down and we go down these series of waterfalls, just down and down and down, and we get into this crankum back and forth thing, and it's getting narrow, and we're thinking, uh-oh, that's not good. And then we hear in the distance this roar. We hear this big roar, and it starts getting bigger and bigger as we get closer. And Ryan's going, Dad, this is good. And all of a sudden, you just pop out of the end of this canyon, and all you see is blackness. The floor just ends, and you see this big scoop going down, and the water just roars over the edge and shoots down the scoop and then drops off of this jagged edge. We didn't have any rope, we didn't have anything with us, nothing at all. So we thought, this cave's huge, it's big, and we could just, we threw some rocks down, and they'd just go flying down and not hit anything at all, and hit boom, and hear this humongous echo. And we just thought, we're gonna go to the center of the earth.
We knew that there's just no way we're going to be able to do this by ourselves. Already the amount of cave that we had come through, dropping two really deep pits, and now coming to the top of the third one, we just knew that this was way too much to take into our own hands.
So I went down there and sat there for hours. It's kind of a deceiving cave because you look down the entrance and it doesn't look that deep initially. It looks maybe 60, 50 feet. You can see kind of a ledge down there, but once you go past that, the chamber becomes much larger, you know, maybe 60, 80 feet wide. And yeah, it's pretty exciting.
These guys go in ahead of us, and we go in and drop off, and we start surveying. And of course, surveying this crankum thing, it's every 2 feet you get a shot. We finally got all finished, and so we start looking for a way to rig the rope out of the waterfall. And right out a ways, there's this rhinoceros horn that sticks out. We thought, oh, perfect, we'll throw the rope over that rhinoceros horn and rappel down. Well, that isn't as easy as it sounds. Number one, the rhinoceros horn was a razor blade edge, and number two, there's nothing to hold on to, and so you're kind of balancing, and you gotta get on rope and then work your way over the rhinoceros horn, which has nothing on the other side, and then get down and put the rope on the rope pad. And we actually put 2 rope pads on this thing because it was sharp. We thought, oh, this is nasty. So put 2 rope pads on it. Well, I think we even ground it a little bit with a rock, and then put 2 rope pads on it and put the rope over it. Anyway, so then all of us worm our way out to this thing, balance, teeter, finally get on the rope and get down.
If there was an accident at this point in the cave, it would be quite the project to get them out, and it would be bad.
We get rappelled down, and every one of us is saying, we don't ever want to do that again. We're going to have to change that. We got to do something different. But anyway, we finally get down to the bottom, and we start our exploration.
had finished surveying quite a long section of cave. You're tired, you're cold, you're wet, and so you're just focused on getting on the rope and ascending up.
I was pretty much geared up and ready to go, and Dan was ready as well. And so I just let Dan go. So Dave and I are just sitting there, kind of found a good spot we could stay out of any kind of rock fall. And I remember Dave and I had mentioned, oh, this is really taking a long time. We know Dan doesn't take this long to climb a drop.
Anything beyond about 200 feet, there's quite a bit of rope stretch. And you're bouncing and swinging, spinning, a little bit disorienting sometimes, dark, wet, there's water falling on you.
This is one of those drops that you get so far up the rope, you look down, it's dark, you look up, it's dark, the rope's just hanging out of thin air. So it gives you this impression that, what am I doing here? Why am I on this rope and this endless climb?
As I began to approach that edge, I knew I was getting close to the top, and as I looked up, I could see the rope didn't look the way it should. The sheath was completely gone, and the core had probably half of the core had been cut, and the rope changes a little bit of shape at that point. It begins to spread out, almost like violin strings spread across the edge of this rock, and so I could see that the rope pad had slipped away, and the rope had been cut pretty much almost all the way through. My heart pretty much stopped. I was about 10 feet away when I saw this, and I kind of held still for a minute, and I thought, okay, this is bad. And so I began to move really slowly, tried to cause as little movement as possible because I didn't want the rope to cut anymore. And I got a little bit closer, and I slid my upper ascender over the sheath and the core, or what was left of the rope, and compressed it back, and it slid over the top, and then I knew I was safe. I had one anchor above the cut part of the rope. And so I climbed above the cut part of the rope, and I tied a butterfly knot to tie out that section that was cut for the other cavers to be able to continue up, and put the rope pad back in place, and I think I'd calmed down a little bit at that point.
Knowing that I had let Dan go ahead of me really hit home too, because I'm a bigger guy and I bounced the rope more. And the thought that what might have happened had I gone up first and bounced that rope a little bit more than Dan would have, was another experience that I'll never forget, being in that cave.
Well, the water definitely makes it through, and there's definitely limestone from here to the spring, so it's a question of whether there's an actual physically passable cave that we can make it from here to there. So we all hope there is, and the deeper you get, the more water you have, the more the water comes together, the bigger the passages should be. So the deeper we go, it should get better.
The other day, Dale came calling, see that mountain standing over yonder. What do you think the old girl's hiding? What do you think she's got down under? Wake up, boys, we gotta go caving. Wake up, boys, we gotta go now. Wake up, boys, we gotta go caving. Gotta find out what's underground. Grab your rack, your harness, your ascenders, your suit, your rope, and toss it in your pack. We'll party all night at high elevation. It just may be that we won't come back. Wake up, boys, we gotta go caving. Wake up, boys, we gotta go now. Wake up, boys, we gotta go caving. We gotta find out what's underground. Up at the hillside, campfire swinging. Robin, Rodney sitting and singing. The deer and cattle, they're all hiding. Ralph